They say a widow should grieve 2 years, then move on. I'd given them 3. The town council thought that generous enough. I woke that Christmas Eve morning to frost on the windows and an empty bed. My breath made clouds in the cold air of the parsonage. December 24th, 1883. The last Christmas I'd spend in this place. In this calling. In this life I'd built with Thomas. The church stood silent next door. First Creek Church, they called it. Thomas built it with his own hands, board by board, nail by nail. I could still see him on that roof, hammer in hand, calling down to me about his vision. A church for the broken. He'd said, a place where anyone could find sanctuary. I dressed slowly, fingers clumsy with cold and something else. Dread. Maybe. Or resignation. Hard to tell the difference after 3 years of moving through days like walking through water. The church was empty when I entered through the side door. 5 pews showed wear from the elderly members who still came on Sundays. The rest stood dusty, unused. I counted them sometimes when I couldn't sleep. 15 empty rows. All that hope, all that wood, all that space for a congregation that never came. I walked to the pulpit Thomas built, ran my fingers over the grain. The floorboards creaked under my feet, worn spots where his boots had paced while he wrote sermons. I knew every creak, every knot in the wood, every place his hands had touched. This building was all I had left of him, of us, of the future we'd planned. Yesterday, Council Chairman Harrison had delivered the ultimatum in that condescending voice he reserved for women and children. Close the church by New Year's. Mrs. Whitfield, move on with your young life. Find a proper husband. As if grief operated on their schedule. As if I could fold up my calling like old laundry and start fresh somewhere new. 28 years old. And they thought I should be done with ministry because the building was half empty and I was fully alone. I made my decision standing there in the cold sanctuary. If this was my last Christmas as pastor, I'd honor Thomas properly. I'd cook a feast. I'd set the table. I'd make everything perfect, even if the only audience was memory and regret. The church hall smelled like dust and old hymnals when I opened it. I lit the stove, carried in wood, started preparing. Turkey from the farmer who paid his tithe in goods. Potatoes from my small garden, pies I'd baked the night before, hands moving through recipes Thomas loved. Cranberry sauce, fresh bread, all of it. I set one place at the long table, 1 fork, 1 knife, 1 cup. The silver felt heavy in my hands. My footsteps echoed on floorboards meant for crowds, for community, for the full pews Thomas had dreamed about. I told myself I was honoring his memory. The truth, which I wouldn't admit for hours yet, was simpler and more terrible. I was terrified of what came after this, terrified of being just Anna, not Pastor Whitfield's widow, not the keeper of someone else's dream. The church smelled like cinnamon and loss. Funny how those scents can mingle, how Christmas can taste like goodbye. I measured ingredients with precision, as if getting the recipe perfect would somehow make the ending easier. As if turkey cooked exactly right could fill the hollow space where purpose used to live. I'd forgotten sugar existed, forgotten sweetness was possible. 3 years of bitter coffee and bitterer prayers. Outside. The first snow began to fall. Inside. I set the table for 1, polished the fork until it gleamed, made everything perfect for an audience of nobody. I stood at the window watching snow cover the empty street. This town had been kind enough, I supposed. They'd let me stay 3 years. Let me pretend I could carry Thomas's vision alone. But kindness has limits, and mine had apparently been reached. I thought about the council meeting. Harrison's face when he'd said I should move on. The other men nodding, not cruel. Exactly. Just done with me. Done with this dying church and the young widow who couldn't let it go. Maybe they were right. I set the table for one, polished the fork until it gleamed, made everything perfect for an audience of nobody. Outside, the first snow began to fall. Inside, I waited for nothing in particular. Got something else entirely. The knock came mid-afternoon while I was basting the turkey. I froze, ladle in hand, listening. Footsteps crunched in the snow outside. Heavy boots. A man's tread. Then a long pause before the knock itself, hesitant. Asking rather than demanding. My heart beat loud in the sudden silence. I wiped my hands and moved to the window. A man stood at the door, hat in his hands, weathered face, maybe 40, a drifter's pack on his back. He stood the way men do when they're tired, but still have their dignity. Not begging, just waiting. Thomas always said you could judge a man's character by how he knocked. Demanding versus asking. This man was asking. I didn't answer at first. Stood there behind the curtain, trying to decide. 3 years alone had taught me caution. Town gossips would feast on this widow alone with strange man on Christmas Eve. I could hear their whispers already, see their knowing looks. But the turkey was cooking for nobody. The table was set for one, and something about the way he stood there, patient in the snow, reminded me of Thomas's gentleness. I opened the door but kept my body blocking the frame. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice was quiet, respectful. "I apologize for intruding. I smelled cooking and wondered if the church might have work available. Or food. I can work for either." "It's Christmas Eve," I said. My voice came out harder than I meant. "I know. Ma'am, that's why I'm asking." Seemed like a day for charity. But if you're uncomfortable, I understand. "I'll move along." He started to turn, I heard myself say. "I have more food than one person needs." The words surprised both of us. He turned back, studied my face. "I don't want to impose." "You're not—" I stopped. What was I doing? "I'm Anna Whitfield, pastor here." "Samuel Grant, ma'am." "Traveling to my brother's ranch near Silver Creek. Got delayed by the snow." I stepped aside, gestured him in, immediately regretted it. What would the council say? What would Harrison think? But it was done now, and I'd learned you can't uninvite someone without causing more trouble than the invitation itself. "Warm yourself," I said. "Dinner won't be ready for an hour." He removed his hat. His coat. Moved carefully, like a man used to making himself small in other people's spaces. I brought him coffee and returned to the kitchen, hyper-aware of his presence in my sanctuary. I set another place at the table. My hands shook slightly. 2 forks? 2 knives? 2 cups? The table looked less lonely. That scared me more than his presence. I knew the risk. Widow alone with strange man, the gossips would feast for months. But standing there with that turkey cooking for nobody, I'd made a choice. Maybe the first real choice in 3 years. He had Thomas's quietness. Not the words, the spaces between them. The way some men know when silence is kindness. When I brought the food out, we sat across from each other at the long table. "You can bow your head if you'd like," I said. "I won't be offended." He did. Closed his eyes. Moved his lips silently. I pretended not to notice how that eased something in my chest. How I'd missed seeing someone pray who meant it. The elderly congregation prayed. Of course. But their prayers felt rote. This felt real. We ate mostly in silence. He had careful manners. chewed slowly, used his napkin, didn't talk with his mouth full. Small things. Everything things. "This is the best meal I've had in months," he said finally. "You're kind to share it." Seemed wasteful not to. I looked at my plate. I cooked too much. He didn't ask why. Didn't pry. Just nodded like he understood about cooking too much and eating alone and the particular loneliness of Christmas Eve after we ate. He stood. "I'd like to chop wood for you, if you have an axe. Payment for the meal, that's not necessary. I know. But I'd like to, anyway." I showed him to the woodpile, watched from the window as he worked. He moved efficiently, economically, each swing purposeful. The pile grew. I wondered when I'd started watching, when I'd stopped pretending not to care. We sat across from each other at the long table. Didn't speak much. He bowed his head before eating. I pretended not to notice how that eased something in my chest. How I'd missed seeing someone pray who meant it. While Samuel split wood outside, wagon wheels creaked into the churchyard. I looked up from washing dishes to see a young woman climbing down awkwardly, one hand on her swollen belly. Pregnant, alone, wagon listing to one side with a broken wheel. I dried my hands and went to the door. "I'm sorry," she said before I could speak. "My wagon broke. I'm heading to my sister's in Silver Creek. But the wheel," she gestured helplessly. I saw the light. Thought maybe the church could help. "I can pay." "Come in," I said. "Warm yourself." Her name was Mary. Widow. Like me. Her husband died in a cattle stampede 6 months ago. The baby was due in February. She had nowhere else to go except her sister's farm. And now, the snow had her stranded. I made her tea. Set another place at the table. 3 now. 3 plates where there'd been 1. Samuel came in with an armload of wood, saw Mary, and nodded respectfully. "Ma'am." "The wagon wheels broke." I told him. "Can you—" "I'll take a look." He went back out. Mary and I sat in that peculiar silence of women who recognize each other's grief. She didn't ask about my wedding ring. I didn't ask about her baby's father. Some things don't need words. Then another wagon arrived, a farming family of 5 parents. 3 children under 10. Caught by the sudden snowstorm. Could they wait out the weather in the church? I said yes, before I'd thought about it. Then more came. Like snow. I thought later, first 1 flake, then a flurry I couldn't stop. Sarah arrived next, former saloon girl. Everyone knew it. She saw the lights from the church and asked if it was open. Her voice carried shame and defiance in equal measure. I recognized that voice. I'd used it myself. Lynn came hesitantly, the Chinese railroad worker who lived in a shack by the tracks. He apologized 3 times before I could convince him to come inside. Young Jacob appeared at the window, the mixed-race child who slept in the livery stable because no one would take him in. 10 years old and already learning he didn't belong anywhere. He didn't knock, just looked through the glass like a hungry ghost. I opened the door. "Come in, child. Come in." 20 people by dusk, maybe more. I'd stopped counting. These weren't the respectable families Thomas had envisioned filling these pews. These were the people proper society crossed the street to avoid. The outcasts. The unwanted. The broken. I stood at the threshold of the church hall, watching them arrive, and felt something like panic rising in my chest. What was I doing? This wasn't the plan. The plan was to eat alone and grieve and say goodbye properly. But then I remembered Thomas reading scripture. The least of these. He'd said, I'd thought he meant I should fix them. Now I wondered, if he'd meant I should simply see them. "Ma'am," Samuel appeared at my elbow. "We need more benches, more places at the table. Should I—" "Yes." I said, "Yes. Bring everything." He organized without taking over. Got the farming men to help move benches from the church. Extended the table with planks. I watched him work and realized he was giving me a choice. I could send them all away, or I could let this happen. I let it happen. Mary mashed potatoes without being asked. Sarah set places, her hands quick and competent. Lynn lit candles with careful precision. The farming mother directed her children to help. It stopped being my dinner and became something else. Something communal. Something alive. I thought I was in charge, thought I was the one giving charity. But watching them work together, laughing despite their troubles, I realized something was happening I didn't understand. Something bigger than my plan to eat alone and grieve. By evening, the church hall glowed with light and voices. 20 strangers becoming something else. I stood at the threshold, watching, wondering what I'd created, what I'd allowed to be created. This wasn't Thomas's vision, but maybe it was. Maybe I'd been so focused on preserving his exact plan that I'd missed his actual point. Young Jacob tugged my sleeve. "Miss Anna, are we really all staying for dinner?" "Yes," I said, found myself smiling. "Yes, you are." His face lit up like I'd given him Christmas itself. By dusk, the church hall glowed with more light than it had held in years. Not the right people, the wrong people entirely. So why did my heart, locked tight for 3 years, start to remember what opening felt like? We moved around each other like dancers learning new steps. That's how I'd describe it later. When people asked what that night was like, 20 strangers and one widow. All of us figuring out the choreography of shared space and unexpected grace. I watched Samuel teach Jacob to hammer straight, fixing a loose board on one of the benches. His hands guided the boy's smaller ones, showing him how to hold the tool, where to strike. Jacob's face was pure concentration. When had this child last had someone teach him anything with patience? "Not too hard," Samuel said quietly. "Let the hammer do the work. That's it." "Good." Jacob beamed. I turned away before they could see me watching. In the kitchen area, Sarah and Mary worked side by side. Sarah's hands moved with practiced efficiency. She'd worked hard her whole life. You could tell. Mary hummed while she stirred gravy, an old hymn I recognized. The farming mother joined in, then one of the children. The tune filled the hall like warmth. I'd forgotten what full sounded like. Not pews hearts. The church was more alive empty of proper people than it had been full of them. Lynn stood apart at first, uncertain. But when the farming father struggled to lift a heavy pot, Lynn stepped in without a word. They carried it together. By the time they set it down, they were talking about crops and weather, finding common ground in the language of men who work with their hands. I moved through them all, ostensibly supervising, but really just observing, cataloging moments. The way Sarah gently braided Mary's hair while they waited for bread to warm. How the farming children taught Jacob a hand-clapping game. The sound of Lynn's laughter when one of the men told a joke in broken English that somehow landed anyway. These were the people proper society rejected. The fallen woman, the foreigner, the mixed-blood child. The struggling farm family, one bad season from destitution. The pregnant widow, with no prospects. The drifter with nothing but a pack and worn boots. I'd spent 3 years trying to fill these pews with the right people. These were the wrong people by every measure the council would use. So why did it feel so right Samuel caught me watching? Our eyes met across the room. He smiled slightly. That quiet smile that barely moved his face, but somehow reached his eyes. I looked away quickly. Too quickly. He'd know I'd been staring. Damn the man for noticing things. I busied myself at the piano, that instrument Thomas bought from a traveling merchant. My fingers found the keys, they knew the way, even when my mind wandered. I started "O Come All Ye Faithful," and the room gradually quieted as people recognized the melody. They sang off-key, enthusiastic, genuine, nothing like the elderly congregation's thin, proper voices. This was messy and alive and somehow more worship than I'd heard in this building in months. Jacob climbed up to stand beside the piano, watched my hands. "Can you teach me?" he whispered during a verse. "You want to learn piano. I want to learn everything." His eyes were hungry, not for food, for knowledge, for skill, for someone to think he was worth teaching. My throat tightened. We'll see. I managed. After the carol ended, I stood and announced dinner was ready. We gathered around the extended table, every bench pulled in, every plank we could find. All of it barely enough. I'd set 20 places now, maybe more. I'd lost count. We bowed our heads. I spoke the blessing Thomas always said. "For this food and this fellowship, for the hands that prepared it and the hearts that share it, we give thanks, a chorus of amends, soft as snow falling." The food passed from hand to hand. People talked, laughed, told stories. The farming father described his land with pride despite his struggles. Mary spoke about her hope for the baby, how she'd name it after her late husband. Sarah said almost nothing, but her face gradually lost its defensive hardness as the meal progressed. I noticed the second coffee cup before I realized I'd set it out. For Samuel, for tomorrow morning, for the idea of tomorrow mattering old habits. I told myself, new ones. Myself answered back. Samuel sat across from me again. We didn't talk much. We'd fallen into a comfortable quiet earlier. But I was hyper-aware of his presence, the way he made sure Jacob got enough food, how he passed dishes before people had to ask. Small kindnesses that probably meant nothing but felt like everything. I wondered when I'd started counting his footsteps. When had his silence become familiar? When had I begun to miss it when he went outside to bring in more? Would dangerous thoughts, foolish thoughts. He was leaving after Christmas. They all were. This was one night, one anomaly in my careful, controlled grief. Miss Anna, Mary touched my hand. "You all right? You've hardly eaten." I looked down at my plate. She was right. I'd been so busy watching everyone else. I'd forgotten to feed myself. Story of the last 3 years. "I'm fine," I said, started eating to prove it. After dinner, as we cleared plates, the farming mother pulled me aside. "Thank you," she said quietly. We had nowhere to go tonight. The children were scared. "You gave them Christmas when we had nothing." I wanted to say I'd done nothing, that they'd stumbled into my own sad goodbye party, but looking at those children's faces, full and warm and safe, I realized intent didn't matter, only impact. "You're welcome," I said instead. That night, as we set the long table together, I realized something dangerous. I'd stopped counting how many people I was feeding, started counting how many I'd miss when they left. Math had never scared me before. Someone suggested more carols after dinner. I found myself back at the piano, Thomas's piano, my fingers on his keys. The bench creaked the way it always had. Candlelight made shadows dance across the worn ivory. I remembered Thomas's hands covering mine on these keys, teaching me the harmony part for Silent Night. His favorite carol. He'd hum the melody while I played, slightly off-key but full of joy. The memory came sharp and sudden, real enough to hurt. I started the song. My voice held steady through the first verse, faltered slightly on the second. By the third verse, I couldn't continue. The notes blurred. My hands froze on the keys. Tears came without permission. I'd cried alone for 3 years. Private grief. Respectable grief. Silent grief in empty rooms where no one could see. This was different. This was witnessed. This was real and raw and impossible to hide. I expected embarrassment. Expected pity or awkward silence or someone trying to fix me with platitudes. Instead, Samuel's voice picked up the melody where I'd dropped it. Just continued singing like it was natural. Like grief wasn't something to be ashamed of or hidden away. Others joined him. The carol continued around me while I wept. No one tried to stop my tears or make me feel better, or tell me Thomas was in a better place. They just sang. Let Me Break held space for it. When the song ended, silence settled soft as snow. Young Jacob tugged my sleeve. "Why are you crying?" "Miss Anna." Everyone waited for my answer. I could lie. Could say I had something in my eye or the smoke bothered me or anything except the truth. "I miss my husband." I heard myself say. This was his church, his dream. And I've been so afraid of failing him that I forgot how to live. The words hung in the air. Too honest. Too raw. But once spoken. I couldn't take them back. Samuel spoke quietly from his seat across the room. "I lost my wife and daughter to scarlet fever 2 years ago." His voice was steady, but I heard the pain underneath. Sarah was 6. Emma was 31. I thought moving west would outrun the grief. Turns out it moves with you. Sits beside you. Becomes who you are until you decide it doesn't have to be. Mary's voice came next, soft and thick with tears. "My husband died in a cattle stampede 6 months ago. This baby." She touched her belly. "He'll never meet his father. I'm terrified every day." Sarah spoke then, her voice defensive and vulnerable at once. "My family disowned me when I was 16. Told me I was dead to them. I've been dead to everyone respectable ever since." Lynn shared in broken English about the village he'd left behind in China. How he sent money, but never enough. How he might never see his mother again. The farming father told about their eldest son drowning in the creek last spring. How the surviving children still wake up crying sometimes. How grief doesn't fit the timeline people expect. Around the room, each person shared their loss, their wound. The thing that brought them to this church on Christmas Eve when they had nowhere else to go. I thought I was alone in grief. Thought widowhood made me special in my suffering. That night I learned we're all carrying something. All of us broken. All of us still here, despite everything. When Samuel said, maybe that's what church is supposed to be, not perfect people pretending, but broken people healing, I felt something unlock in my chest. Permission. Permission to be human instead of holy. To admit I was drowning instead of gracefully swimming. To stop performing strength and actually find it by admitting I didn't have it all. I looked around that room, outcasts and orphans, widows and wanderers, and saw what Thomas had seen. Not projects to fix, not charity cases to manage. People to love. The difference felt monumental. I thought I had to keep everything exactly as Thomas left it. I said, every hymn the same, every tradition perfect, as if changing anything would mean I'd lost him all over again. But maybe I stopped, started again. Maybe honoring someone's memory means living their truth, not preserving their exact vision. Mary nodded. Sarah wiped her eyes. The children sat quiet and solemn, understanding more than I'd expected. Jacob climbed into my lap without asking, just settled there like he belonged. I wrapped my arms around him and felt my heart crack further open. We sat like that for a long time. No one spoke. The candles burned lower. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, something that felt like healing started its slow, uncertain work. I'd thought I was giving them sanctuary. Realized too late they were giving it to me. That night, after everyone settled on pews and borrowed blankets, I stood in the doorway, watching them sleep. 20 strangers who'd become something else. I thought about Thomas's words, a church for the broken. I'd been trying to fix the broken. He'd meant to shelter them. Sometimes the difference is everything. The door banged open near midnight. No knock this time. Just boots stomping snow and righteous anger filling the space like smoke. Council Chairman Harrison stood in the doorway, 2 other council members behind him. His face was red from cold and fury. His eyes swept the room, cataloging everyone who was wrong: the Chinese worker, the saloon woman, the bastard child, the drifter. Mrs. Whitfield. His voice dripped condescension. What is the meaning of this? I stood from where I'd been sitting with Mary. Cold air rushed in from the open door. Behind Harrison, I saw a familiar figure scurrying away Mrs. Patterson, the worst gossip in town. She'd reported us. Of course she had. I'm providing shelter on Christmas Eve, I said, kept my voice level. Is there a problem? Problem. Harrison stepped inside, letting the door slam behind him. The sound woke some of the children. We've been patient with your grief, Mrs. Whitfield. 3 years of patience, while this church declined under your... He paused delicately. Care? But this is unseemly, unacceptable. These people need help. These people. His lip curled. Vagrants. Fallen women. Heathens. That Chinese. And that mongrel child. In a Christian church on Christmas Eve, the words landed like slaps. I felt each one. But I also felt something else rising in me. Something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Fury. Those people have names, I said quietly. Sarah, Lynn, Jacob, Mary, Samuel, the Patterson family. Would you like me to continue? I don't care what they are my congregation now. Silence. Harrison stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Maybe grief had finally broken something that needed breaking. Your congregation, he laughed, sharp and cruel. You have 5 elderly members. Mrs. Whitfield, 5. And even they won't come much longer. This church is dying because you cannot what? I stepped forward, felt my hand stop shaking and start steadying. Cannot be a man. Cannot fill pews with respectable families who'd rather judge than serve. Cannot make this building what you all think it should be instead of what it needs to be. My father's voice echoed in my head. Nice girls don't make scenes. But Thomas's voice came louder. Righteous women do. I chose Thomas. This church is open, I said. These people are welcome. It's Christmas Eve. And they're staying... Harrison's face darkened. Then you leave me no choice. The council will close this church immediately. Tonight, we'll call the sheriff to remove these undesirables. And you will lose your stipend, your housing, everything. You'll have nothing. I felt everyone watching, felt the weight of their hopes and fears pressing against my back, felt 3 years of grief and loneliness and trying to be good enough all come down to this moment. Then do it, I said. Close the church, take the stipend, call the sheriff. I'd rather have a church that's closed for the right reasons then open for the wrong ones. Samuel stood, moved to my side, didn't touch me, didn't speak, just stood there. Then Sarah stood. Then Mary, heavily pregnant and fierce. Then the farming father, his children behind him. Then Lynn, hesitant but certain. Then everyone, one by one, creating a wall of bodies between Harrison and the door. Lynn spoke in broken English. "Lady Pastor, give us home. We protect home." The farming father's voice was steady. "Council never darkened this door before tonight. Now you care about Christmas," Harrison sputtered. "You people don't understand. We understand perfectly," Mary said. Her hand rested on her belly. "You want a church for people like you? She's built one for people like us." Harrison looked at me with something like disgust. "You're making a terrible mistake. We'll see to it that what I kept my voice level. That a widow who welcomed strangers on Christmas Eve faces consequences? Go ahead. Tell everyone. I'm sure that'll play well." He had no answer for that. Turned and left. The other council members following. The door slammed again. Cold air lingered. For a long moment. No one moved. Then Jacob spoke up, his child's voice clear in the silence. "You stood up for us." I looked at him, at all of them, at Samuel, still standing beside me like he had every right to be there. "Of course I did," I said. Sarah touched my arm gently. "Thank you." I almost laughed. "Thank you. I'd just lost their church. Lost my income. Lost any hope of the council changing their minds. But looking at their faces, grateful, determined. Together I wondered if I'd actually found something I'd been missing. After they settled back down, the fear came. I stood by the window watching snow fall and felt my hands start shaking again. What had I done? Come morning, they'd all leave. They had to. They had their own lives, their own destinations. The council would close the church. I'd have nothing. I'd spent 3 years being good, being proper, being the widow they expected. That night, I learned good and right aren't always the same. Sometimes right looks like rebellion. But rebellion didn't pay bills or keep roofs over heads or provide futures. I wondered if I'd just destroyed the last piece of Thomas I had left. All for one night of feeling less alone. After midnight, when everyone slept on pews and borrowed blankets, exhaustion pulled at me. But my mind wouldn't quiet. I lay in the parsonage bed staring at ceiling boards I could count in the dark. What had I done? The question circled like a vulture. By morning, they'd all leave. Mary would continue to her sister's farm. The Patterson family would head home. Samuel would travel to his brother's ranch. Sarah would return to whatever life she'd built. Lynn to his shack, Jacob to the livery stable. They'd scatter like seeds. And I'd be left with a closed church. No income, no purpose, nowhere to go. The council would evict me. I had no family to return to. My parents died years ago, and I had no siblings. Thomas had been my only family, and he was 3 years gone. I'd lost everything for one night. One foolish, impulsive night of playing pastor to people who didn't even want a church in the first place. The thoughts spiraled faster. I got up, paced the cold floor in my nightgown, looked at the small bag I kept packed, a remnant from when I thought I might leave after Thomas died. 3 years later. Still packed. Still ready for flight. I could leave before dawn. Tell them all to go. Close everything myself and spare the council the trouble. Start over somewhere. Anywhere. I pulled the bag out from under the bed. Started adding things: a change of clothes, my mother's Bible, the picture of Thomas I kept on the nightstand. The deeper fear surfaced as I packed. I'd been using Thomas's memory as an excuse to hide, to not risk my heart, to stay frozen in acceptable grief rather than face the terrifying possibility of living again, of wanting again, of hoping again. Tonight made me feel alive. That's what scared me most. Not Harrison's threats or losing the church. The fact that I'd laughed, I'd cried, I'd felt things besides numb resignation. Feeling anything after 3 years of numbness was excruciating. A soft knock at the parsonage door made me jump. Samuel stood there, hat in hand again. Always with the hat in hand. Like he was perpetually asking permission to exist in space. "Saw your light," he said quietly. "Thought I'd check on you. I'm fine." He looked at the bag on my bed. Didn't comment. Just stood there in that patient way he had. "I'm leaving," I said. No point lying. Before dawn. Before they wake up. It's better this way. Is it? Yes. They'll leave anyway. The council will close the church. I'll have nothing. Might as well leave on my own terms. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I came west, running from ghosts too. I waited. Thought if I kept moving, I wouldn't have to face what I lost. My wife, my daughter, the life we'd built. His voice was steady, but I heard the tremor underneath. I've been moving for 2 years. Different towns, different jobs, different roads, always running. Did it help? No. He looked at me directly. But tonight, watching you build this thing, this community from nothing, I realized something. We honor the dead by living, not by dying with them. The words hit like a physical blow. What if I can't do this? My voice broke. What if I fail them all? What if you don't? Such a simple question. It rearranged everything. I sat down on the bed. He stayed in the doorway, respectful of propriety even now. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Inside, everything felt suspended. 3 years, I said finally. 3 years. I've asked myself, how do I keep his dream alive? Wrong question, wasn't it? Right question is, what dream is mine to live? Maybe they're the same. Maybe they're different. Maybe both are okay. I thought about Mary's baby coming in spring, about Jacob learning to read, about Sarah finding dignity, about Lynn being called by his name instead of slurs. Small things. Everything things. Samuel's question haunted me. What if you don't fail? I'd been so certain of failure, I'd never imagined success. What if I could do this? What if we could? I looked at the bag on my bed, at the life I'd been about to run toward, no from, always from, never toward. I'm tired of running, I said. Me too. I'm still terrified. That's different than defeated. I stood, started unpacking the bag, put my clothes back in the drawer, returned the picture to the nightstand, kept my mother's Bible out. I'd need that strength tomorrow. Samuel watched without comment. You staying too? I asked. Don't know yet. Thinking about it. What's holding you back? Wondering if I'm running toward something or just stopping running from trying to figure out the difference. I understood that. God. I understood that. He left after a while. I sat in Thomas's chair, touched his Bible, remembered his words about a church for the broken. I'd thought he meant I should fix them. Maybe he meant I should simply shelter them. Let them shelter me. Let broken be enough while we all healed together. 3 years I'd asked, How do I keep his dream alive? Wrong question. Right question was, what dream is mine to live? Maybe they could be the same. Maybe different. Maybe both were okay. I thought about tomorrow, about the council closing the church, about having nothing left but the choice to try. I unpacked my bag as dawn touched the windows. Didn't know if I was brave or foolish. Didn't know if this would work. But I knew one thing: I was done running from life. Done hiding in death. If I was going to fail, I'd fail trying. That felt like resurrection. Small, uncertain, but real. I woke Christmas morning knowing exactly what I had to do. The clarity felt strange after months of fog. I dressed carefully, braided my hair, put on my Sunday dress. If I was going to make a stand, I'd do it properly. The church smelled like wood smoke and coffee when I entered. Samuel had the stove going already. People were stirring, children rubbing sleep from their eyes. Mary moved slowly, one hand on her back. Sarah was already helping prepare a simple breakfast from what remained. "Good morning," I said. They turned, looked at me, waiting. I'd practiced a speech, rehearsed it in my head while braiding my hair. But standing there, looking at their faces, the speech evaporated. Only truth remained. "I need to tell you all something." My voice was steady, strange. "Last night, the council said they're closing this church. I have no money to keep it running. No way to fight them. I can offer you nothing permanent." Silence settled heavy. "I'm telling you this because you deserve honesty. You deserve to know what you'd be staying for, which is nothing, or almost nothing." More silence. Then the farming father cleared his throat. "I know carpentry. Can help with repairs the church needs. Got time before spring planting." Mary spoke next. "I could start a community garden come spring. Know how to grow vegetables. Could feed a lot of people. I can cook," Sarah said quietly. "So, mend. Whatever's needed." Lynn nodded. "No masonry. Church chimney." He gestured. "Crumbling, can fix." One by one, they offered what they had. Skills, labor, time, hope. They weren't asking me to save them. They were offering to save each other. I felt something crack open in my chest. They weren't asking me to be their savior. I would tell people later. They were asking to be community, to belong, to build together. I'd been so focused on preserving Thomas's church, I'd missed the point. Church wasn't a building. It was people choosing each other. "I'm staying," I said. The words came clear and certain. "I'll fight the council. I'll fight to keep this church open. Not as it was, but as it should be. A sanctuary for anyone who needs one. A place where outcasts are family. Where broken people heal together." I paused. Let the words settle. "If you'll stay and build this with me." Nods around the room. Mary was crying. Sarah's face had lost its defensive hardness entirely. The children looked hopeful in that way children do when adults finally make sense. I turned to Samuel specifically. He stood near the stove, watching me with those quiet eyes that seemed to see too much. "Samuel." My voice was steady. "I need to ask you something." He waited. "Will you stay? Help me build this?" I took a breath. Not because I can't do it alone. I probably could. Eventually. Given enough time and stubbornness. A few soft laughs from the others. But because I don't want to anymore. I'm tired of alone. Tired of strong meaning solitary. The words came from somewhere deep. "Will you stay as my partner in this?" The room went silent. Everyone watched. This wasn't just about the church anymore. We all knew it. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I've been looking for a reason to stop running. Reckon I found it. I need to be clear." I stepped closer. "I'm not asking for I don't know what comes next. But I need you to understand. If you stay, we're equals, partners. No one saving anyone. Just together. I understand. As equals." I repeated, "I'm not Thomas's widow looking for someone to take over. I'm Anna, building something new. And I need a partner who sees my strength and doesn't need to diminish it." "I see it," he said quietly. "That's why I'm staying." Something passed between us. Not love yet, too soon for that word, but possibility, hope. The foundation for something that might become love if we gave it time and space and honesty. I turned back to the others. Then we plan. What repairs are needed first? Who can do what? How to make this sustainable? How to build a church that serves the people who need it instead of the people who think they deserve it. We sat around that long table, the same table I'd set for one just yesterday. Now it held 20 people planning a future I hadn't imagined 24 hours ago. I wasn't alone carrying a dead dream. I was part of something living, building towards something instead of protecting something that was already gone. The council would fight me. The town would gossip. Everything would be harder than I imagined. But looking at their faces, determined, hopeful. Together I thought hard is different than wrong. I'd been choosing easy and calling it faithful. Time to choose hard and call it honest. When I asked Samuel to stay, I wasn't asking for a husband. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I was asking for a partner who saw my strength and didn't need to diminish it. Who could stand beside without standing over? That's what I needed. That's what he offered. I learned something that Christmas, asking for help isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing a strong woman can do. Asking for partnership even braver. I asked. He said yes. We said yes to each other. The council would come. Harrison would make good on his threats. But standing in that church, with my community around me, I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Ready? Christmas morning, 1883. The day I stopped being Thomas's widow and started being Anna who built Sanctuary. The day 20 strangers became family. The day I learned the difference between preserving the past and honoring it. The day I chose life. Finally. Fully, without apology. They ask me now, 20 years later. When I knew it would work, I tell them the truth. I didn't. I just chose to try. That's all faith ever is. I'm sitting in that same church as I write this. First Creek Church, though we don't go by First Creek much anymore. People call it Anna's place, though I've tried to discourage that. It's not mine. Never was. It belongs to everyone who found refuge here when they had nowhere else to go. The council did try to close us. Harrison made good on every threat. But something funny happened. The people we'd helped that Christmas started telling their stories. Mary's sister came and told the whole town how we'd sheltered her pregnant sister in a storm. The farming family spoke at the next council meeting about Christian charity. Sarah surprised everyone. She started a school for girls from difficult circumstances. Taught them to read, to sew, to manage accounts. Gave them skills to build different lives. Half the council's wives secretly send their daughters to her now, though they'd never admit it publicly. The struggle was real. Long, hard. We lost people. Some moved on, healed, which was its own victory. Some stayed. Both were good. Samuel became my partner in ministry, just like I asked. He managed repairs, building projects, all the practical work that kept the church standing. I shepherded the spiritual side. We made a good team. We still do. He asked me to marry him on the anniversary of that first Christmas, 1 year to the day. I said yes because I'd learned the difference between replacing someone and choosing someone new. Thomas would always be my first love. Samuel became my second. Both were gifts. Neither diminished the other. We have 2 children now. Sarah is 17, named for the woman who taught me that fallen and forgiven can coexist. Thomas is 14, named for the man whose dream I finally understood. Young Jacob runs the carpentry shop Samuel taught him. He's 28 now, married to one of Sarah's first students. They have 3 children who call me Grandma Anna, though we share no blood. Family, I've learned, isn't about blood, it's about choice. Mary's daughter is 17, studying to be a teacher. Mary stayed with us instead of going to her sister's. Met a widower from the farming family 2 years later. They have 5 children between them, now blended family, all of them thriving. Lynn became our master mason. Fixed that chimney, then fixed every chimney in town. Trained apprentices. Brought his mother over from China 5 years ago. She's 90 now. Lives with him and his wife. Presides over family dinners like a gentle queen. We built cottages on the church land, started businesses, created real sanctuary. People come, stay as long as they need, leave when they're ready. Some never leave. That's okay too. The ministry we created isn't what Thomas envisioned exactly, but I think it's what he meant. He said a church for the broken. I'd thought he meant I should fix them. He meant I should shelter them. Give them space to heal. Let them heal me too. Some Christmases are quiet. Some are chaos. Tonight will be chaos. Good chaos. 40 people for dinner. We pull in every bench, every plank. Everyone welcome, everyone family. A young woman arrived this afternoon. Recent widow, 26 years old, lost her husband to winter fever last month. She stood at the door, the way I must have stood 20 years ago, uncertain, afraid, alone. I saw myself in her eyes. Come in, I told her. There's always room. Samuel made space at the table without my asking. He knows the ritual by now. Our community enfolded her the way they enfolded me that first Christmas. Gentle, patient, understanding that broken needs time to heal. She sat next to me during dinner. How did you survive? She whispered. I thought about how to answer. Thought about that Christmas when I planned to eat alone and ended up building family. Thought about the moment I chose to stay instead of run. Thought about asking Samuel to partner with me as equals. I learned to let people help, I said. Learned that strong doesn't mean solitary, that grief and joy aren't enemies, you can hold both. That honoring the dead means living fully, not dying with them. She nodded like she understood. She would. Eventually, the council told me to move on with my young life all those years ago. I did just not the way they meant. I moved on from grief to purpose, from isolation to community, from holding tight to letting go, from being Thomas's widow to being Anna, who builds sanctuary. Thomas built a beautiful building. I thought that was his legacy. But that Christmas taught me buildings crumble. Community endures. He didn't need me to preserve his dream. He needed me to live its truth. They ask if I miss him still. Of course, every day. But grief and joy aren't enemies. I learned to hold both. Grief for what I lost. Joy for what I found. Both true. Both sacred. 20 years of Christmas dinners. 20 years of broken people becoming whole together. 20 years of learning that the strongest thing a woman can do isn't survive alone. It's choose to live together. That's the life we built. That's the woman I became. I look around the table tonight, 40 faces, 4 generations. More stories of loss and healing than I could count. The young widow watches them all with wondering eyes. Tomorrow she'll hurt, Next week, she'll doubt. But tonight, she's surrounded by people who understand. Who've walked that road? Who'll walk it with her? I catch Samuel's eye across the room. He's telling Jacob's oldest about proper joinery. Patient as always. His hair is silver now. So is mine. We've built a good life, a full life. Not the life I planned when I was 28 and setting a table for one. A better life. That Christmas, I set a table for one. Thought I'd spend the evening alone, saying goodbye to everything I loved. Instead, I built a family. And they built me right back. Every heart that breaks can mend. Every woman who stands alone can find her people. Every table set for one can become a feast for many. That's what I learned. That's what I teach. That's the legacy I'm building, not in buildings, but in hearts that stay open even after they've been broken. This is Anna's story. This is how sanctuary gets built. One choice at a time, one person at a time. One Christmas at a time. And Thomas, wherever he is, I think he'd be proud. I know I am.